Yeah, it's an iPad, but I've got the connector if you've got an HDMI or...
I do have an HDMI.
Okay.
This is a wireless connection. I guess you gotta get it to connect first. Let's bring it up for a while.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this will go into the HDMI. And is there a power source?
Oh yeah.
You don't have...
Oh no, I don't need a power source. Do you have audio through this as well?
Yes.
Good.
But this is not going to work unless this is powered.
Oh.
So let me see what else.
Here you go.
Do.
Good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who didn't hear the introduction, my name is Scott Diehl. I'm the Vice President of Product Management for the Word & Brown GA. The beautiful thing about today is that this is normally a CE course, but it didn't end up getting filed in time. Nahu missed filing it. So today I get to also pitch to you our services and explain how technology is considered at Word & Brown, all the way down to the very last detail. So let me start with a little bit of technology that you may not have recognized as a piece of technology while you visit our booth today. How many of you have a USB drive? How many of you have lost a USB drive? Yeah, just about everybody. So one of the technology considerations that came across our marketing desk earlier this year was how do we fit a style of communication that makes it so that we can deliver documents to you that you won't lose. In comes our pen. For those of you who don't have a pen yet, go and get one. It is a piece of technology. And in fact, if you pull it in half, what you will find is that there's a USB drive hidden inside. The idea being that if you have this pen, you won't lose it because it's a pen. You're going to use it to write, you're going to stick it in your coat pocket, and that way you can store data on it and feel that it's more secure. It's not like those little drives. Don't lose the pen. So cybersecurity is the basis for my talk. Actually, when I got down to product management, I started out in sales, and you'll hear that in my voice. I started out in sales, and about in 2008, I was promoted into product management. It was a new and emerging department in our company, and we are the tech people. We are the people who liaise between our IT department and our business unit. And just for edification for size, you know, Word & Brown has over 650 employees in the state of California, and that's after the sale of Connexus. We were closer to 1,000, and of those, there are about 250 in our IT department. These people are constantly churning code, manning our IT operations. So when he mentioned that we have 30 customer-facing applications and internal applications, we do. And we manage security, a protocol across all of those. And you know, for those who aren't paying attention, we are currently experiencing a technology revolution in our industry. It's going to take over. The question is, which platform will survive, which platform will be the best, and which one will be the most secure? And that's actually a question that I'm not getting asked. So it's one of the reasons why I wanted to come and present this to you today, because you guys are going to walk out of here with a lot better education around the security protocol and network protocol that you're going to be facing as you adopt these technology platforms. I'm also here to scare the bejesus out of you. So these are the things that we're going to cover. We're going to cover a little bit about security, a little bit about some of the threats that are out there, and some of the things that you can do to secure yourself and your business, and of course your customers. I want you to understand the common threats, and then I want you to be able to defend yourself against them. So, a little bit of history. Cybersecurity is not new. It actually started back with the Morris worm back in 1988. The Morris worm was an infiltrator to a very tiny, one of the very first internet connections based out of universities. They connected a bunch of computers at universities to be able to share information, to be able to share scientific findings. Totally cool, right? Well, what they found was somebody infiltrated their network. They put a virus on there, the Morris worm, and it actually slowed their computers down, and then it presented a message to them saying, hey, you've been hacked, you're vulnerable. So it was somebody who was trying to send a message to them saying, hey, look, you can't connect systems and expect that they're going to be impervious to any kind of assault. And it started the whole prevention and security measures that have evolved today into software services like Norton, Internet Antivirus Security, and Malware. Two really good software applications that you can get to protect yourself. A few years ago, some terminology came into the marketplace, and I think more and more people are becoming relaxed about what it is, and they feel comfortable. One of those was cloud infrastructure, and I heard it brought up today. And what I found when I've talked to people individually is they were willing to tell me, I have no idea what that means. And I'm here to tell you today, what cloud infrastructure really means is it's just there's a big data center somewhere, usually out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of the desert, and it is where all this data is stored. So all of your personal information that you type in on various platforms gets stored in these big data centers, and they become incredibly important to your security protocol, incredibly important to maintaining your privacy and your private data. The beautiful thing about them is that they're accessible anywhere, right? So you now have access to your data no matter where you go. Like on my iPad, I've got access to my data 24/7, doesn't matter where I am, even up in Fresno. The beautiful thing is that there's big companies that are offering these. iCloud for one, right? Apple. Amazon Web Services, AWS. It's the backer for eCentral. It's where they store all of their data. And Azure is a big Microsoft program. So that's where they store all of your OneDrive information if you access Office Online. So why is hacking so prevalent? Well, it's the money, right? And actually, a little bit of a side. So I know a lot of people in this, in the information technology space, and especially around security. A lot of my friends have migrated up to Silicon Valley, and I keep in touch with them because they get to be on the forefront of, the bleeding edge, so to speak, of what we're dealing with and what we're facing. And one of my friends introduced me to the Tor network. The Tor network is, one of the beautiful examples of technology, both good and bad. The Tor network allows people to communicate anonymously. And there's a lot of very good reasons why that exists and why it's useful. For example, it could be used by someone in a Middle Eastern country in order to be able to communicate with the outside world information that their governments might not want us all to know. Conversely, the Alpha Bay market exists on Tor, and the Alpha Bay market, you can go online and you can see people's credit card information that you can buy. You can literally go in, just like you're shopping on Amazon, and say, I want this American Express number and that MasterCard number, pay your Bitcoin, and you're out the door with their credit card information. Your credit card information. Remote desktop protocols, by the way, those are the ability to remotely sign in to a network security infrastructure. So for example, and we are not atypical in this regard, most development houses are using offshore development resources because they are very cost effective. For us, that required a significant security protocol around not sharing any data, right? Because these people have access to all of the sensitive information that you store within your database. So we have remote desktops that anybody in our Indian facility out in India have to sign into that are local on our facility, on our campus in Orange. And from there, we control the data that they gain access to. So if they see any 9-digit numbers on the screen, they get scrambled. Right, for good reason. Dates of birth get scrambled, right? So we have all of this programmed into our remote desktop protocol. However, even then, if you have access to it, you get access into some of the more private data that is available on any network. Available for purchase now. So the question becomes, how can I be hacked? Well, aside from the obvious, I started to do some research on this topic, and I really found some very terrifying things. For one, implanted medical devices. So any kind of defibrillator that you have installed, insulin pumps, there's vasectomy, transmission stopper that can all be implemented that are all network enabled, which means that your doctor can take and scan your body and read the device. Well, that also means that device can be hacked. Connected cars. I own a Chevy Volt, beautiful, USA, go, USA. And the beautiful thing about it is that it's a highly technologically savvy car. One of the downsides is there's 6 computers on that car. There's a computer that tells me whether or not the tires are meeting the recommended required pressure up onto my dashboard, which is also controlled by another computer. There's a braking assist computer so that if a car is in front of me and it brakes too heavily, my car will brake and I won't hit them. There's also a computer that controls the lighting systems. There's also a 4G wireless connection on my car, and there's an XM radio on my car. Right? So there's 6 computers that are available that can all be hacked, and various universities have done studies about hacking these cars. One actually recently found a buffer overrun, you don't have to know the technical term, a buffer overrun issue in XM radio where they were able to gain control of a car remotely, initiate the braking sequence, turn off the brakes, download the GPS location of the vehicle. So if you think about it, right, like Tesla, they just had 2 cars get stolen out of someone's garage, right? So how did that happen? They compromised the vehicle security system on the car. They geolocated it through the GPS. They got there. They turned on the engine through the engine control system, which is computer-based. They unlocked the car. They disabled the anti-theft, and they drove those 2 cars right out of that person's garage. And if you think your internet-connected car is any less secure than Tesla's, you're probably not right, because their security infrastructure is some of the best. Communication. So communication is really key these days, right? We all communicate, and in fact, they've done all kinds of studies around, how communications can be intercepted. For example, I bought a drone the other day. They're really fantastic for recording video, especially because you can get points of view that nobody else can get. However, if a drone gets set up with a repeater mechanism for cellular communications, it can literally intercept your phone calls, because your phone will be tricked into thinking that the communicator is actually, or the repeater is actually, a cellular phone tower. All your calls, all your phones, phone calls, all your texts, all your emails will be routed through that responder, and they will have everything. There's a lot of other examples like that. The P25 radio is a good example. Everybody knows those because they failed to work in 9/11. All of the first responders at 9/11 were unable to communicate with one another because the P25s were jammed. Surprise, surprise, right? What would a terrorist want to do? Well, they would want to jam our first responders' ability to communicate with one another. So there's a number of research stories out there about P25s. They're the Motorola two-way devices. They look like big walkie-talkies, only they're supposedly a bit more secure. Well, did you know that the security protocol on the P25 to encrypt the communication that you're having on the P25, it's a toggle. It's literally a switch on the top of the screen and then a dot on the visual display. How often do you think that gets missed? There was a University of North Carolina study where they found that in 20 different locales, they recorded the broadcast channels that P25s communicate on for fire, police, FBI, and what kind of information did they get? Well, about 20 minutes a day, unencrypted communications were going over those wireless communications that included private information, criminal information. It included people who were inside of the witness protection program from the FBI. So you name it, people are able to pick it up. Smartphones, last one for this. Smartphone accelerometer. So a very unprotected bit. Who knows what an accelerometer is? Yeah, I didn't either. Very good. The accelerometer is what tells your phone whether or not it is upright or not. So for example, iPhone uses that when you pick it up, it takes the call that you've just picked up, right? That's the idea. However, if you place your accelerometer on your desktop right next to your keyboard, how many do that? Yeah, I don't anymore. And here's why. Your accelerometer can be used to measure the keystrokes on your keyboard. And it's so effective at picking up vibrational signals that it can actually be used to record that information and decode everything that you've just typed. And there's nothing regulating an accelerometer. For example, on Android, every bit of the device that you use on Android, it has to register itself as using that component of the device except the accelerometer. So there you go. Never leave your phone on your desktop again. And then there's all forms of permissible hacking. For example, Gmail. Who uses Gmail? Awesome program. I use it too, although less now. Have you ever read their privacy policy? No, I didn't either when I first signed up. But now I know. One of the things that you have given them permission to do is to track your email communications. All of your email communications, all of your attachments go into a big database, one of those big cloud data infrastructure systems, and they go in and they look at that data and they use it to advertise to you. So if you've ever seen those advertisements that have followed you, that is Google leveraging what you put inside of your email. I need to go and do this, say your task list for the day. They use that to advertise to you. So beware. There are lots of avenues for these people to, by your permission, go in and get information about you. You're being tracked everywhere you go at all times on the internet. And don't think that you are. To exemplify that point, I'll leave it to Gary Kofax. He's the founder of Firefox. He speaks to you about behavioral tracking. They have a software that he mentions called, it was originally called Collusion. It's now called Lightbeam. It's a really fun little toy to go play with. If you have Firefox, go and download it. It's an extension, it's totally free, and it will show you all of the different sites that are tracking you. Well, if you can hear. Hold on. Well, where's the AV guy when you need him? I need audio. Volume? Not for the mic though. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Yeah, turn it the other way. Nothing doing, huh? If we can't fix it, we'll move on.
But just as the internet has opened up the
Sweet.
world for each and every one
Thank
of
you.
us, it has also opened up.
What the heck? Hold on. We'll try this one more time and then we'll just let it go. Nope, that's down. Okay, we'll let it go. Next. So, suffice to say, what Gary talks about in the video is that he sits down at breakfast with his, I think, 6-year-old daughter, and they're reviewing the normal things that you review at breakfast. The news, they're reading through emails. His daughter goes online to look up the definition of a word, and as they are going through that process, what you see on the screen behind him is the visual display of all the sites that are tracking him. So while he is just going to 4 sites, there are actually 20 that are sent his information in the background that he doesn't even know about, that he's not aware that they're sending him this information, and they're tracking him, and they track him throughout his day. He goes and then he blogs, and then he reads some more news articles, and then he looks at a couple of videos on YouTube. All of that information is being stored by a whole bunch of companies for a whole heck of a lot of money in order to be able to advertise to you. So go and check out Lightbeam. It's a really great fun time to take a look at who's looking. And you'll find some very interesting names on there. So how cyber safe is your business? The answer to that question is it's not. I guarantee you. You know, I don't say that just to scare you. I say that so that you walk into these things aware of what you're doing, aware of your online presence and the footprint that you're leaving behind. In 2015, there were a lot of major breaches. The most notable one for us was Anthem's breach, where they lost 80 million records. That means 80 million people's information was shared within the network, which is possible that it now presents itself as a security risk on Alphabet, so somebody could go and buy it. That's social security numbers, that's dates of birth, that's claims information. So healthcare is becoming an increasingly risky business. And as we are transitioning all of our business onto these online platforms, you know, it's going to only grow in the risk that presents to us. And it presents it to us very meaningfully, and I'll get into that in just a second. So you can see here this year, actually this was year to date as of May, there were 63 breaches in the healthcare market space. That's going to go up because the number of breaches, the number of records that they get per breach in the healthcare market space is way more than what they're going to get if they go into like a credit card or a payment processor. because of the degree of security. Our industry is a bit young as far as technology is concerned, so the data infrastructure, the security infrastructure is not where it needs to be in order to protect us and protect our data and protect our customers. It's not true, by the way, at Word & Brown. We are incredibly aware of what it takes to be secure. You know, we have multiple environments. We have a lot of IT operations that are devoted to watching our security, watching for incoming communications, and we have a lot of protocol around one of the most risky components to any business, which is the people, right? And I'll get to that in just a sec. So you might assume that these are big companies that are getting hit. And more, the answer is no. What hackers are finding is that smaller companies are actually at greater risk, and it's because they are easy targets. So one of my brokers called me and said, "What is a firewall?" Cyber threats. So there are a lot of threats out there, not just the ones that I mentioned earlier, but all of these things can now be threatened by hackers. So anybody, using a cloud service, whether you realize you are or not, hardware versus virtual machines, which I mentioned before, any kind of wearable technology can now be hacked. And I say these things, and yet I also use these devices, so I know what you feel. Wi-Fi hotspots. How many of you use a Wi-Fi hotspot? Be careful. If it's yours, it's one thing, right? If it is Time Warner Cable, for example, I'll tell you a little story. One of my associates actually was out and about, and down in Los Angeles, where I live, Time Warner Cable provides free Wi-Fi, free hotspots that you can log into. Well, little did my friend know, got online, signed into Time Warner Wi-Fi, right? That's not a Time Warner hotspot. So his information, signed into his bank account on the Time Warner hotspot, signed into his bank account, signed into a couple of other things, signed into his email. Now the hacker had all that information, his identity was stolen. You know the story. So Wi-Fi hotspots, just because they're public and available, does not mean you should sign in. Then there's employee attacks. So I mentioned our greatest risk are our employees. An employee gets an email from somebody that they assume to be valid. Perhaps it's even looks like it's from somebody within the company, and this has happened. There are lots of schemes out there where an employee, if they click on something, now your network infrastructure can become infected with a virus or a worm, and it can quickly spread from that one computer across your entire network database. So be very aware of that. And the question is, do you have employee security awareness training? Usually the answer is no. Highly suggest you at least sit down with your employees and say, hey, look, if you get an email that looks fishy, come and talk to me before you open it. There's lots of clouds out there. The thing is, be aware of what you're using and where it's storing your data. So I mentioned East Central. Nobody has ever asked me where East Central stores their data. It's stored up in Amazon Web Cloud. Okay, so just be aware of the things that you're using, where they're interconnected, and where your data is going, because it will help you. Yes, sir?
Brings up an interesting subject with Windows 10 being tightly integrated with OneDrive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, OneDrive Business, encrypt,
Mm-hmm.
or enjoy encryption. Do you know, is the OneDrive personal? Is that encrypted? Obviously, data at rest is your responsibility, but
Right.
transit and up on there, you know?
So yeah, actually, it depends on you. So like most things, what they will do is they will encrypt the connection up to their part of the connection. Through the insecure transmission lines that represent most of the internet, that transmission can be intercepted. If you've set up on your side of things that there is a bidirectional encryption of all of the data that's being transmitted and received, then you're fine. Here's an example. Email, right? Everybody knows email's not secure. Everybody sets up their email account, they install secure socket layers, SSL communication. You think your email's secure? It isn't. It isn't. That just means that you are connecting with your ISP, and that bit of the connection is secure. Once the data leaves your ISP, interceptable. What does Word & Brown do? We offer TLS security. TLS is certificate-based security, where you set up on your site the TLS certificate, we have it already on our site. If you request a quote out of Word & Brown's website, you can actually have that transmitted TLS security, which is encrypted all the way through the process, all the way to your computer. So that's the answer to your question is, if you set it up correctly, yes, it can be secured in rest, in transit, all the way through the process. But if you haven't, and you don't know necessarily how to do that, which is most people, then you might have a problem. It's definitely worth getting someone from, say, like the Geek Squad to come out and take a look. Make sure that you've got it set up correctly. So internet ads are another big risk. If an employee is surfing the web, which they never do, right? If an employee is surfing the net and they click on an ad can take you to a malicious website where malware can be installed on your computer. You don't even have to say yes anymore. It's just automatic if you hit the website. So there's lots of security software out there that will tell you whether or not a website that you're hitting is safe to browse on. Definitely, if you have somebody who is a novice user in the tech world, get them one of those services. It will help them in the long run. So I'm not going to bother to play the video for this. Malware is basically software that you agree to have installed on your computer or is installed maliciously, and it just sends data out. So it reads what you're doing, it reads your keystrokes, and it sends that data to whomever installed it. Phishing is a little bit different. So phishing, what they do is they actually send you a bit of communication. And in the hopes that you'll respond to that communication. And these are getting really, really sophisticated. I actually got an email from Southwest, or at least I thought. Southwest, and it had their logo, and it had their look, and it had their feel, and it even had their footer that comes on the normal Southwest email communications. But the link inside of there was not Southwest. And the way I told that, or the way I discovered that, was you hover your mouse over it, and the real link that underlies the highlighted text will actually show up on your screen. And it was some garbly China. I'm like, nope, that's not, I'm not clicking on that. But that's the kind of thing that you have to be paying attention to now. No longer can you just assume that even an email that looks like it's a valid email is actually from the sender. You really have to watch what you're seeing, and pay very close attention to the minute details. And it will be in the minute details that you'll notice the difference. Now, there are some that are more obvious, right? Like if it's from Bank of America and there's a big misspelling in there, that's probably a pretty good red flag that it's not from Bank of America. I'm not going to bother to play the video. You guys are missing out on some good videos, by the way. If you do want a copy of this presentation, because you do want to see these incredible videos that I'm passing up, it is posted on my LinkedIn. You're also welcome to email me, and I'll be happy to share it with you. Cyber threats. So ransomware. This is one of the more recent versions of cyber warfare. Ransomware allows a user to approve download and install of software on their computer, or if you have an employee situation, an employee can do it, and it can infect an entire network, where they lock the data infrastructure so that you cannot gain access to the data files in the computer. A message then pops up on the screen, and it says, call this number, pay us $500, and we will release your computer. I've actually heard of individuals having this happen to them, having this happen to their parents, and they've had to pay that money because $500 for a computer with all of your photos and your documents and your emails on it versus $500 for a new computer, well, you can kind of guess where they went with that, right? But it's happening on a grand scale at very large businesses. Most notably recently was the Hollywood Presbyterian hack. Hollywood Presbyterian was on a relatively new data infrastructure technology for security. However, one of their employees clicked on a link. And that link installed ransomware that prevented Hollywood Presbyterian from accessing all of their data files. So their people, someone mentioned earlier about have a good plan for when there's an issue. Have a good plan, because their people actually resorted to using fax, phone, and data and non-computer based files, patient files, for all of their services for a week while they figured this out. They ended up paying almost $15,000 in Bitcoin in order to get their computer system released. So rather than try and figure out a way around it, they just paid the ransom and moved on. Another new one that's come out, whaling. Has anybody heard of whaling? It's a really fun one. So whaling targets executives. I actually heard of a really good example of this recently. Someone in a finance department in a company I know actually got an email, and it looked like it came from one of the executives, and it said, "Send out my W-2 information to my accountant, here's their email address." And of course, the person in finance said, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. I will send out your W-2 information to the accountant." Not good, right? That criminal now has access to that person's W-2 information, which is, of course, all their social and tax filing and income, and you can imagine what that's being used for. So it's usually executive directed, so because they know that these people have, relatively high incomes, they're very good targets, and of course they don't hit at the executive themselves, they hit at anybody who has access to their data, which can be a lot of people. And then of course there's social engineering. So this is actually probably one of my favorite videos. If you get the presentation, skip to this one because it's really funny. Social engineering is the means by which you can convince somebody to give you information. And in this video, there's a Jimmy Kimmel, one of those sidewalk Jimmy Kimmel deals, where they go up and they talk to people and they ask them for their password. And at first people are like, "I'm not giving you my password." And they're like, "Well, what is your password?" "Well, it's my cat's name and my date of birth." And then they like slowly evolve and get that information. "Well, what kind of cat do you have?" And then the person answers that. "Well, how long have you had it? How old is it? Oh, and what's its name?" And then they get the name. And it's unbelievable what somebody who calls you or emails you can get out of you without you even knowing, and it's a very real security risk. Public Wi-Fi, I already covered that. Don't do it. Sounds good, not good. HIPAA. Anybody know what HIPAA stands for? Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Some of you may know, some of you may not. It's privacy, but it's also portability of health insurance. It was a great law at the time, passed with flying colors through the legislature, and it's done a lot of really good work to protect consumers. And it's only been added to since. So in 1996, it set standards not only for protection, but also for privacy and portability. So a factoid, the FBI estimates that there's basically $80 billion a year in healthcare tax fraud. Pretty amazing, right? It's a lot of money. So what agency administers HIPAA? Anyone know? HHS, very good. You wouldn't believe how many people get that wrong. So privacy, portability, and accountability. The accountability part is the part that should terrify all of us. And not originally, by the way. When HIPAA was passed, there were no teeth in the legislation. It just set standards, and those with good morals and ethics abided by those standards. And then, of course, they passed additional legislation that created teeth. So we all know about certificates of creditable coverage. They used to be a big hassle to get them out of any health insurance company. They also did a lot to help protect people who were in the middle of care, of course. But ARA came on the scene, and ARA actually created business associates. We are all business associates, and actually everybody who works for us are business associates, which means now we have to abide by HIPAA. So if you're moral and ethical, you will abide by privacy and protection standards, right? Well, then high tech came on the scene. High tech actually made us all individually accountable for any kind of fines that get levied based on HIPAA violations. So you and I are personally accountable for violations that somebody in our company commits, or if we commit a violation within our company. So it strengthened all of the provisions of HIPAA, and it also gave them the ability to fine. So HIPAA. We all know, at least most of us know probably what that means and what it protects. It protects personally identifiable information, and then when that's coupled with any kind of health information. So for example, if you're talking to a client or emailing a client with a quote for their health insurance, and it presents to them the portion of the premium that they are going to be paying, that is HIPAA protected information. It's PHI. You think email's secure? So any kind of medical conditions, treatments, doctors, if you are collecting doctor information through email, no, don't do that. Medications and any kind of other payment information, all of that is all HIPAA protected information. It's something that you need to very closely safeguard in your business transactions day to day. PII versus PHI, I think I covered that. PII is personal identifiable information. PHI is when that is coupled with any kind of health information or any kind of premium payment information. There's quite a bit of information in here. So you get examples of what PII is. Name, address, email, social, all kinds of good stuff. Health status it makes it PHI. So you can see all the different combinations. If it's a medical condition, it's one thing, but if it's treatments or a phone number, then it becomes PHI. What's EPHI? Electronic, very good. So emails which contain PHI are now electronic PHI, which means they're protected by HIPAA. So if you're sending a bunch of emails with a bunch of client information, no, don't do that. Because while you are probably not on the FBI watch list today, they will be looking at you tomorrow. So one of the things that I can tell you about Word & Brown is that we obviously pay a whole heck of a lot of attention towards security. We actually operate under the payment card industry data security standards, which means we go well above and beyond what HIPAA requires of a company and make it that much more secure. So whereas, with your bank, or not with your bank, with like a grocery store, Amazon.com, they use 128-bit security, which means there's 128 bits between what you're communicating and the security code that gets transmitted just before that allows you to decrypt it correctly and allows it not to be intercepted, right? We use 256-bit, right? So we're a lot higher standard than what most companies are going to abide by. And of course, there are state laws that have been layered on top of HIPAA, right? So SB 1386 and AB 1710. Security breach notification. So when HIPAA was passed, you didn't have to tell anybody that you had a breach. Isn't that nice? You just had to report it to the federal government. Of course, the federal government, they care about themselves, right? They don't necessarily care about the consumer. But states can care about the consumer. So the state passed the law that now requires us to notify any California resident when their data has been breached. And then, of course, now there's purchaser standards that were passed in 2014. So if somebody purchases data off the internet and your data is there, they need to notify you if it contains any kind of HIPAA private data. How many of you received those notifications? Yeah, me neither. I'm wondering if that's actually being followed. So consequences of a breach. Now, there are lots of consequences, right? For example, if I get off this stage and Word & Brown posts a breach on our security infrastructure, tomorrow, I'm going to be really embarrassed, right? Just like any company would be. I think Anthem suffered a little bit of embarrassment when they had that huge breach last year. And it's a loss of reputation, a loss of revenue, and really, all of these things are easily preventable just by being aware of what you're doing and how you're operating. So violations range from anywhere from $100 to $50,000 per day. And those are just the violations, the fines. There's also civil penalties, right? So if somebody takes you to court because you've mishandled their information, now the fines can become quite extraordinary. And of course, ignorance, just like in any case of the law, ignorance is no excuse. So this is another really great video. I don't know if any of you are TEDites. I'm a total TED head. They have really fantastic educational lectures. I listen to them in the car. I don't watch the videos, I just listen. But Monica Lewinsky actually ended a decade of silence through her TED Talk. If you haven't seen it, it's really fascinating. I left it to her to actually describe the consequences of a breach as a person who had suffered a really significant and very public breach. However, since she won't be able to speak, what I'll tell you is what she talked about. One of the things that she mentioned is that by our leveraging of technology, we are all becoming way more susceptible than we might think. So she mentions users of Snapchat. So for those of you who don't know, Snapchat is a facility whereby you can engage in chat that disappears after a certain amount of time. It's user directed. So I can send a message and I can say this message will be deleted after 30 seconds. So you can imagine the range of content that gets sent across Snapchat. Well, somebody developed another app that based on Snapchat that allows users to store Snapchats, right? That service was breached. And as a result, hundreds of thousands of people's private pictures, communications were posted on the web, including a bunch of celebrities. So beware of the systems that you're using. Poor Monica, she couldn't speak to you today. Almost there, guys. So, lots of consequences, right? There's fines, there's loss of clients, loss of reputation, there's personal liabilities for you under high tech. So being aware is your best thing to do. Be prepared. Have a procedure for when you have a breach. Word & Brown has a chief compliance officer, Jeff Hecht. I'm in communication with him all the time, not because we have breaches, but because I like to make sure that all of the products that we're putting into the marketplace are secure. So we go through a serious vetting process for any kind of software that we put into the marketplace, but also the things that we actually offer up as vendor-based solutions as well. Designate someone to understand security protocols, security measures. Put things in place that educate your staff. Make sure your staff are thoroughly educated. Get this presentation from me. It's totally free. I'll be happy to email it out and have them walk through it so that at least they become aware of what the risks are. More than happy to share that with you. Word & Brown actually has a number of security training protocols that we'd be more than willing to share with you guys. Because if you're secure, we're all secure, right? And we need to get there. Personally, use two-factor security authentication. Highly suggest it. Can't suggest it enough. I know it's a hassle. I know it's more time. However, you will find that eventually, as cyber threats become even more severe, this will save you. Strong passwords. How many of you use the same password for multiple sites? I should see every one of your hands. Don't give me that. So what I'm going to show you is my security program. This is MSecure. I'm not an MSecure employee. I don't make any kind of commission off their stuff. I highly suggest you get a security password program and put it on your iPhone, or put it on your Android phone, right? The reason being is that these allow you to develop really secure passwords without having to remember them all, and then you can readily access them because they're accessible from any kind of platform, including your desktop. So for example, this is Touch ID. Which, by the way, I'll tell you a quick anecdote about Touch ID versus typing it in on the screen. Touch ID is very secure, and you can see here that it shows all kinds of good information. It automatically blocks anything, so you guys can't see my password up on the screen. But you can see quite a few passwords get stored inside of here. Every single one of these is unique. So I've got almost 450 passwords that I am responsible for. Every single one of them is unique. Most of them are 26 characters plus, and most of them have all kinds of really strange characters. You think I'm going to get a breach, a security breach? Right? So use the tools. Don't use public Wi-Fi. Please don't. Android. Beware of Android. They don't vet their apps the same way iPhone does. It takes about 9 weeks to get any kind of app up into the iTunes App Store. It doesn't take that kind of rigor to get into the Android store. And they've recently done a study where they found 20,000 of those apps have malware installed on them. And when you download those apps, they install software like the stuff that reads your keyboard strokes and whatnot, and then it transmits that data out. So be very aware of what you're using. So real quick, before I give up the podium, one thing I want to tell you about password security. One of my friends, I brought up the University of North Carolina. One of my friends is going there, and he's studying security right now. Really, really bright guy. And they actually did a very interesting study where they rode on buses, and they took video of people on the buses. The people weren't notified, of course, so all names shall remain obscured. But what they did was they back engineered through the reflection on sunglasses and ultimately through the reflection on the glass behind the people. And they could tell what their passwords were to get into their phones and then what they were typing. And with a simple computer algorithm, they were able to read. So you know how when you're typing on your phone or you're typing on your iPad and it pops the text up onto the screen, that brief display was sufficient for them to be able to decode what people were typing, their passwords to get into their phones. So be very aware of your surroundings when you're using your devices. Definitely take advantage of any kind of fingerprint technology if that is available to you. It's a way more secure method to access your device and then use it. So thank you all very much for your time today. I really appreciate the opportunity to come.